인류는 침팬지 계통이라는 한 뿌리에서 파생됐지만 여러 종으로 진화를 거듭했습니다. 스페인에서 발견된 4종의 인류는 가장 최근에 살았던 인류입니다. 이들은 왜 모두 사라진 걸까요? 70만 년 전에 출현해 50만 년 동안 생존했던 인류. 호모 하이델베르겐시스. 신장이 약 180cm에 달할 정도로 골격이 거대했습니다. 오늘날 럭비 선수쯤에 비할 만큼 건장한 체격이었죠. 하지만 그들의 뼈에 남은 무수한 상처는 고단했던 당시의 삶을 말해줍니다.
Life was certainly dangerous for these people. They had many predators around that would have eaten them. They also had to survive at times quite challenging climate conditions. The winters could have been very cold. And yes, their bodies were built with great strength. They had a lot of muscles, they had very thick bones. So life was very demanding and their bodies were built very strongly for those conditions.
맹수가 도사리는 가혹한 환경에서 생존을 위해 몸집을 키웠던 그들. 뇌가 커졌다는 점에도 주목해야 합니다.
And it increases very rapidly from about 900 cc's to what we have now, which is something about, on average, about 1250 to 1400 cc's. So altogether, from our ape ancestors, it's increased in size by about 3 times.
They had large brains, nearly as big as our brains, so I'm sure they had a good level of intelligence. We don't, of course, know whether Heidelbergensis people spoke or had language, but I think when we look at the complexity of their way of life, the fact that they were organised to either scavenge or hunt large, dangerous animals. For humans, that really requires cooperation and planning. So I think they could speak to each other. Their language probably was a practical language for what they needed at the time. I don't think it was as complex as the language we use today, but I think they were speaking to each other in order to plan and cooperate.
동료를 살해한 최초의 인류이자 죽은 자의 뇌를 파먹음으로써 상대의 지혜를 흡수한다는 의식이 생겨나기도 했죠. 그러나 지구는 점점 추워졌습니다. 누구보다 강인했던 그들도 더 이상 변화를 견디지 못했습니다. 인도네시아의 플로레스 섬. 이 섬의 거대한 석회 동굴에서 2003년 아주 오래된 인류의 흔적이 발견됐습니다. 처음엔 작고 연약해서 어린아이의 뼈라고 생각했습니다. 하지만 뼈를 조합해보니 아니었습니다. 키 106cm에 몸무게 약 30kg의 성인 여성으로 밝혀졌죠. 호모사피엔스의 시대인 18,000년 전에 살았을 것으로 추정되지만 호모사피엔스라고 하기엔 너무 작습니다. 도대체 그녀는 누구일까요? 작은 신체가 꼭 반지의 제왕에 등장하는 키 작은 종족과 비슷하다고 해서 호빗이라는 별명을 가진 인류. 호모 플로레시엔시스였습니다.
So Homo floresiensis is a species known on the island of Flores in Indonesia. It's only known from one cave site, Liang Bua, dated within the last 100,000 years, and yet this is a creature that is very small, maybe only 1 meter tall as an adult, with a very small brain, about the same size as the brain of a chimpanzee. So not a human brain size. And yet this creature, we think, walked upright, so its body was a human body, but it had still some very primitive features. And we don't know where this creature came from, how it evolved. There are different ideas. The main ideas really are that it is a descendant of a species called Homo erectus, so known from Java and from China, for example. And one idea is that species somehow got to the island of Flores, which is several hundred kilometers away, and once on that island, the species became smaller, a thing called island dwarfing. So often when large mammals get onto an island, evolution leads them to develop a smaller body size on an island. And so this maybe is what happened with Homo floresiensis. It started off very big, a big Homo erectus, and ended up as a small Homo floresiensis, so small that it's nicknamed the Hobbit because of this small size. Another theory is that this is actually a very primitive form, older than Homo erectus, maybe something more like Homo habilis, so a very small human to begin with that somehow got all the way to Flores, perhaps 2 million years ago, and then it stayed there and evolved in isolation until it died out.
뇌용량이 400cc 정도로 오스트랄로피테쿠스보다도 작았던 호빗. 호모사피엔스의 시대에 이 작은 두뇌로 어떻게 살아남을 수 있었을까요? 자원이 한정된 섬에서 몸집이 큰 종은 점점 작아지고 몸집이 작은 종은 점점 커진다는 섬의 법칙이 있습니다. 고립된 섬에서 그들은 생존을 위해 신장과 뇌의 크기를 줄였던 것일까요? 뇌를 줄이면서까지 살아남으려 했던 그들에게 자연은 자비를 베풀지 않았습니다. 거대한 화산 폭발로 그들은 역사 저편으로 사라집니다.
And suddenly brain size increases quite dramatically from about 450 cc's in great apes and our early ancestors, the Australopithecines. And now it jumps to about 750 to 900 cc's in the early members of the genus Homo erectus in Asia, Homo ergaster in Africa.
인류 진화의 역사는 곧 뇌의 진화라고 해도 과언이 아닙니다. 지금의 우리가 되기까지 진화의 길 위에서 두뇌를 점점 업데이트해온 셈이죠. 400만 년 전, 오스트랄로피테쿠스는 450cc 미만. (200만 년 전) 호모 에렉투스는 뇌 용량이 2배로 늘어 900cc가 되죠. 마침내 50만 년 전에는 3배 정도인 1250cc로 늘었습니다. 여기에 사라진 인류의 단서가 있을까요? 한때 우리는 하나의 조상에서 진화했다고 믿었습니다. 그런데 1975년 케냐에서 그 믿음을 깨는 증거가 발견됩니다. 같은 시기에 두 종류의 인류가 살았던 흔적이었죠. 파란트로푸스 보이세이. 거대한 어금니를 가진 200만 년 전에 살았던 인류의 한 종입니다. 큰 어금니를 품을 만큼 얼굴도 크고 넓적했죠. 이런 모습이었을 겁니다. 큰 얼굴에 비해 아직 뇌가 발달하지 않았던 시기. 뇌 크기가 우리의 3분의 1 정도에 지나지 않았죠. 당시에는 대여섯 종의 인류가 생존 경쟁을 벌였습니다. 침팬지 계통에서 떨어져 나와 진화를 시작한 지 500만 년 후, 몸이 갸냘픈 종과 건장한 족이 생존 경쟁을 벌였습니다. 파란트로푸스 보이세이는 건장한 족에 속하고 호모 사피엔스는 가냘픈 종의 계열이었죠. 하지만 우리는 생존했고 그들은 사라졌습니다. 이유가 뭘까요? 인류는 육식을 시작하면서 내장을 줄이고 뇌의 크기를 늘리는 쪽으로 진화합니다. 그러나 채식을 했던 보이세이의 사정은 달랐습니다. 수컷의 평균 신장은 약 130cm, 평균 체중은 49kg에 육박했던 그들. 풀은 열량이 낮기 때문에 하루에 무려 8시간 동안 먹는 행위만을 해야 했죠. 채식은 사냥을 하지 않아도 됐지만 포식자에게 쉽게 노출될 수밖에 없었습니다. 뇌를 대신해 위를 선택한 그들은 약 120만 년 전쯤 사라졌습니다. 지구는 마지막 빙하기로 접어듭니다. 그리고 극심한 추위를 이겨낸 인류가 등장했습니다. 약 30만 년 전에 나타난 네안데르탈인입니다. 그들은 극한의 환경에서도 호모사피엔스의 시대까지 살아남았죠.
Well, the Neanderthals, of course, existed for a very long period of time, several 100,000 years. So they lived through warm and cold stages. We find them in Italy and in Western Asia alongside hippopotamus, a warmth-loving animal. But in Britain, we find them alongside reindeer and mammoth. So clearly they were actually covering a range of environments. They must have had the ability to make clothing of some kind. So when they were skinning animals, they would have taken off the fur, the coat, and would have made themselves clothing.
놀랍게도 그들은 뇌가 우리보다 컸습니다. 호모사피엔스의 뇌 용량은 1350cc. 그들은 1600cc나 됐죠.
At the end of the day, there've been lots of theories as to why brains have got bigger in the course of human evolution. For making tools, you need a bigger brain for more complicated tools, perhaps for meat eating. But the key really seems to be able to create large communities which are bonded together, cohesive communities which can act to defend themselves against predators, against other tribes from nearby. And in that context, you can see making tools is simply a byproduct of having a big brain. It's not necessarily the thing that made us have a big brain, but once we have a big brain, once you have a big computer, you can do many things with it.
코뿔소나 매머드 같은 맹수를 사냥해야만 했던 시기. 집단은 생존을 위한 필수 조건이었습니다. 집단의 크기와 두뇌의 크기 사이에는 어떤 상관관계가 있을까요?
We can only suppose, we don't know, right? Because we weren't there. But we can show for primates that the key driver is predators in the environment and the way primates solve the problem of predation to avoid being eaten is to live in groups, and groups are a defense against primates. And that there's a relationship between how dangerous the habitat you live in and the size of the group you live in, and then in terms of the size of the brain. And we can show that these change in time in this way through primate evolutionary histories. And I noticed that if you look at something like group size in a species of monkeys and apes, it turns out to be correlated with brain size. So species that live in very big groups have very big brains. Species that live in small groups have small brains.
단순한 언어도 사용했을 것으로 보이는 그들은 늘 작은 집단을 이뤘습니다. 작은 집단에서 한 구성원의 존재는 무척 컸을 겁니다. 네안데르탈인은 죽은 이의 시신을 땅에 묻고 장례의식까지 치렀습니다. 죽음의 상실감까지 느꼈던 걸까요? 우리보다 뇌가 크고 우리보다 먼저 매장의식을 치렀을지 모르는 그들. 그렇다면 왜 그들은 사라지고 우리가 남은 걸까요? 그들이 남긴 치아. 그 속에 단서가 있었습니다. 아주 작은 신체 조직이지만 많은 정보를 담고 있는 치아. 나무의 나이테와 마찬가지로 성장선을 가지고 있습니다. 그 선을 통해 사망 시기를 짐작할 수 있죠. 치아를 통해 그들이 우리보다 수명이 짧은 반면 성장 속도가 빨랐다는 사실을 확인할 수 있었습니다. 어금니가 10살에 나는 우리보다 4년이나 빠른 6살에 났으니까 말이죠. 혹독한 환경에서 수명은 길어야 30살. 네안데르탈인은 느긋하게 유년기를 보낼 수 없었습니다. 늘 일찍 세상을 떠난 연장자의 자리를 채워야 했기 때문이죠. 현생 인류는 지구에서 가장 긴 유년기를 보냅니다. 우리는 왜 유년기를 늘렸을까요? 뇌를 발달시킨 시간이 더 주어지면서 생존에 유리해졌다는 분석이 설득력을 얻고 있죠. 과연 네안데르탈인의 운명을 좌우한 것은 무엇일까요? 마을 단위의 사회까지 만들었던 호모사피엔스에 비해 그들은 집단과의 교류가 부족했던 것으로 보입니다. 그렇게 그들의 수는 점점 줄었습니다. 우리 인류와 마지막까지 생존 경쟁을 벌였던 네안데르탈인. 마지막 빙하기가 끝날 무렵 그들은 지구에서 사라졌습니다.
Why might language have evolved? And one answer to that is because it allows us to create these much bigger communities. And this is a consequence of the fact that monkeys and apes create their kind of bonded communities by grooming each other, looking for vegetation or what have you in the fur. And they spend a lot of time doing this, and the amount of time they spend grooming is correlated with the size of the groups. The species that live in big groups spend a lot of their day doing this kind of social grooming to each other. But the amount of time you can spend grooming is very limited because you have to feed, you have to go looking for food. And this sets an upper limit on group size. You can't create a cohesive community of more than about 50 individuals by this mechanism. And so we were looking for other mechanisms that might allow us to break through that, to increase our group size from the 50 that is the maximum you find in monkeys and apes to the 150 you find in humans. And originally I thought of language doing this, that somehow language is like grooming because I can talk to several people together, right, in a conversation. And this would allow us to increase.
우리는 지금도 철저하게 집단 속에 살아갑니다. 유인원의 최대 50개체를 훨씬 뛰어넘어서 말이죠. 만약 오래전 언어가 없었다면 가능했을까요? 언어는 인류 생존에 얼마나 큰 역할을 한 것일까요?
That's the sort of icing on the cake of this whole process. I mean, we tried various things. We introduced various things which we still use. Laughter is still very important in creating bonding. It allowed us to increase group size a little bit beyond the limits for monkeys and apes. So these are gradually increasing the size of group that you can have, size of community. But what language does, and this is its most important feature, is it allows us to exchange information around the social network about what's happening, who's doing what, who's friends with who, who's upset somebody else. So we know how everybody in the network, in the community, is getting on and how happy everybody is and so on, without having to actually see it. And so the problem for primates is they only know what they see. If two people have a fight, a disagreement, out of sight in the bushes, they don't know about it. But we can say, oh, did you hear so-and-so and the other person had a big disagreement and now they are enemies, not friends anymore. And so this kind of information then becomes important in allowing us to manage the dynamic complexity of personal relationships within a community, keep them working better, as it were. So ultimately it comes back down to understanding individual relationships and how they work among a group of people. And language has that unique property that allows us to exchange information about these things.
던바 교수는 최대 인간관계 규모가 150명에 달한다고 주장합니다. 던바의 수라고 이름 붙인 150명의 법칙. 그는 이 법칙이 아주 오래전부터 이어져 내려온 것이라고 믿고 있죠.
For when we looked at people's personal social networks, your personal social world, we simply asked them to write down everybody they knew, who they had a friendship with, a relationship, a family relationship or a friendship relationship. So it's not everybody you recognize and can say this is President Obama, this one is somebody else. That's a much bigger number. It's the number of people you have real relationships with, real friendships, and that's, you know, if you ask people just to put down the list, of course, you know, some people have a few, some people have more, but the average is about 150. So we thought, well, is it true that people live in groups of just 150? You think of any big city in the world, Seoul, you know, how many million people live there? And first we looked to see if this was really true. We looked first at the size of hunter-gatherer societies, small-scale societies in humans, because this is how we lived most of our history, in small groups. And it turns out that the typical size of their communities is about 150 people.
언제나